Very good. So I have with me Marc Lemaitre, Director General for Regional and Urban Policy, who will give us a short presentation on the CREAT 2 initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. As the President has indicated, our aim is to save lives and to protect livelihoods. And this is how we have approached the design of this second package to adjust the rules underpinning cohesion policy. You will remember that 3 weeks ago we had proposed a first package of adjustments to those rules. We are very happy that by now they are on the rule book because Council and Parliament have approved them. And these changes were aimed mainly at increasing the liquidity available to member states to implement cohesion policy. And the second aim was to extend the scope in order to be able to cover all needs in terms of fighting the crisis, all needs in the healthcare systems of our member states, all needs to protect people from unemployment through short-time work schemes, but also through helping small and medium-sized enterprises through working capital. Now we add another set of new rules which have as purpose to allow all member states maximum flexibility to focus the remaining funding under cohesion policy on any of these three blocks. And for that purpose, we have proposed today to lift all constraints to, for instance, move money between the three cohesion funds which exist, which are the Regional Development Fund, the Social Fund, and the Cohesion Fund, but also any limitations on moving money between categories of regions, as they are called, i.e. less prosperous regions or more prosperous regions. Finally, we have also lifted all obligations to focus a minimum share of cohesion spending on certain areas. This should therefore allow member states to really design the cocktail of crisis-fighting measures under cohesion policy, which they deem the most urgent and the most effective at this point in time. Finally, we have proposed one more measure to ensure a very fast support to member states by allowing them to request for a full EU funding of expenditure for a 12-month period starting on the 1st of July this year and ending at the end of June next year. For those member states which will apply for this possibility, this will mean that they will receive more and faster payments from the EU budget under cohesion policy. Now, to give you an idea of the amounts we are talking about, let me show you these two very simple tables. Taking first a look at the amounts available in 2020 under the three cohesion funds. Overall, more than 50 billion euros, which gives you also a good indication of how much roughly member states could mobilize under cohesion policy for fighting the crisis. Secondly, looking at the distribution between categories of regions, unsurprisingly, you see a strong concentration of funding on less developed regions and lesser support for transition and more developed regions. The difference between the two tables in the totals of about 10 billion is the cohesion fund, which is not distributed regionally. Now let me give you two very simple examples of what this flexibilization might mean for individual member states. Focusing first on the full regional flexibility which we are proposing. If you take the case of Italy, until now the hardest hit member state by the corona crisis, and with a particularly acute situation in northern Italy and specifically in the region of Lombardy. Now, Lombardy is a more developed region. If you look at the distribution of funding in Italy foreseen until now in 2020, you will find that more developed regions benefit from a support of 1.2 billion euros, and less developed regions benefit from a support which is 3 times higher, 3.7 billion euros. So you see that here Italy could, through the flexibilization we have explained, could decide to reallocate geographically part of that funding. Let me now move to the flexibility between types of funds. And here I would take the example of Latvia. Latvia is, for the sake of cohesion policy, just one region, a less developed region, so there is no particular advantage for Latvia to have introduced flexibility between regions, but Latvia benefits from the 3 separate cohesion funds. And again, in 2020, Latvia would benefit normally from 400 million, more or less, from the Regional Development Fund, 80 million from the Social Fund, and 220 million from the Cohesion Fund. Now, Latvia might be, in the present circumstances, reconsidering its priorities and might want to transfer support from, for instance, the Cohesion Fund, which is a fund which serves the financing of major transport and environmental infrastructure, to more pressing immediate needs. For instance, to support short-time work schemes, in which case Latvia could transfer money from the Cohesion Fund to the European Social Fund, which today is the smallest for Latvia. Finally, we have also suggested quite a number of simplifications in administrative rules in order to adjust to the constraints which are faced by public administrations today. I will not run you through these, but these are all measures meant to simplify the life of member states' administrations. I will just end with 2 more remarks to do justice to all the proposals which the Commission has made today. We have also today put forward proposals to help our fishing communities, and next week we will come forward with further proposals to support farming communities. The proposals of today are geared towards three new types of support. The first one would be support to fishermen who temporarily cease their activities. The second one would be focused on the aquaculture sector, which today is facing suspensions or reductions of its production. And finally, there are measures for temporary storage of fishing products would also be introduced. My second and last point is that I wanted to draw attention to the entry into force of the modification to the European Solidarity Fund. It entered into force yesterday, which means that as from now, member states can apply for support from the Solidarity Fund to face public health emergencies. And we have yesterday made available to member states simplified application forms in order to be able to apply very concretely. And just to remind you, the amounts available under the Solidarity Fund this year are of around 800 million euros.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the questions, and the first one we got from Marine Kahn from the EFT about the disbursement of structural funds, and the question is whether it is allocated by the normal cohesion key or based instead on the countries most affected by the virus, worst affected by the virus. Sorry.
We are not suggesting to modify cohesion allocations of individual member states, which have been agreed together with the present multi-annual financial framework back in 2013, but we are opening for all member states, including the UK, the possibility to reprioritise funding in a massive way, taking into account, obviously, that we are in the last year of the present multi-annual financial framework. So you cannot spend €1 twice. It is about the euros remaining. As I indicated, a good ballpark figure is around 50 to 60 billion euros altogether. But this is indeed, all member states have a share in that overall amount, and all member states will have possibilities, if they so wish, to go for such significant reprioritization in the present context.
Thank you. A couple of questions from Pascal Hansens from Agence Europe. Would it be possible to make transfers from the less developed regions and regions in transition to the richer regions? And how will this kind of decision be taken in practice?
The answer is very clearly yes, and as I indicated, without any kind of restrictions. I mentioned one particular national case with the present distribution between the categories of regions of the 2020 amounts. Again, we cannot come back on the past, so we are talking about a possible redistribution of 2020 allocations, and the way to do that is the classic way, i.e. member states would submit to the Commission such a proposal for redistribution, which would entail very concretely a modification of their so-called operational programs, and the Commission would analyze these and approve these.
I think you have actually the answer to the next questions on your slide, but perhaps you can tell us, will the partnership agreements have to be reviewed for these new measures?
No, this is one of the de-bureaucratization measures we propose. Partnership agreements would, from now on, not be modified anymore, and this right up until the end of this programming period.
Next question, is the Commission considering amendments to the regulation laying down common provisions for the next multi-annual financial framework, and what could be the main aims of those amendments?
As the President has indicated only an hour ago, or two now, the next MFF can and should be seen as the central plank of the recovery plan for Europe and also as the Marshall Plan, which some member states are calling for. And it is obvious that in the reflections which will flow into the design of such a recovery plan, we will also look again at the proposals which are on the table today as part of the multi-annual financial framework proposals of 2018 on cohesion policy and therefore the Common Provisions Regulation.
Very good. We have now a couple of country-specific questions on the UK. I believe you've already answered. So we can now move to Hungary-related questions. This question is from Katalin Halmai from Hungarian newspaper Nepsava. What are the options for those member states, among them Hungary, which have already committed the envelope of the cohesion policy funds for the current programming period and have no unused money to redirect the cohesion money to tackle the coronavirus crisis? In case of Hungary, that would be more than 4.7 billion euro.
To our modest knowledge, no member state has spent all of its cohesion allocation. And therefore, there is scope, as I said already, for all member states to reprogram, to reprioritize under cohesion policy. And this is also the case of Hungary. I already gave the example for Latvia. Hungary has a very, very significant allocation under the cohesion fund. Probably, I don't think I would lie wrongly if I say at least 6 or 7 billion euros altogether under the cohesion fund, meaning 1 billion euro per year, and therefore 1 billion euro at least in 2020. Well, Hungary might want to reconsider some of its infrastructure projects which it had programmed, and whether this is really the most urgent priority of the day. I don't know, the upgrading of a road or the electrification of this or that rail track, you name it, and could come to the conclusion that it wishes to reorient towards the three strands that I have mentioned: healthcare sector, support to employment schemes, and support to SMEs.
And a final question from Jan Wischart at Bloomberg, as well as Esther Zalan from EU Observer, related to the conditionality for those funds. Will there be any conditions on rule of law issues when redirecting this money to fight coronavirus, or is the priority now just to be flexible and quick?
The rules, well, the treaty is not changing, and therefore the general framework for the EU when it comes to the respect of the rule of law is not changing. And through these proposals, we are not changing those rules. So questions of rule of law will continue to be examined and addressed as until now. And you have heard the President again state very clearly her concerns when it comes to some measures which member states today have taken, and specific concerns when it comes to measures in Hungary.
Thank you very much. We have now finished the second part of our technical briefing, and we can move to the last part, which is related to the emergency support instrument.